In 1932, in the worst year of the Great Depression, Sears threw open the doors of its brand new State Street store in Chicago, and 15,000 people poured through on the very first day. They did not all come for the tools and the washing machines. A good many of them came for the candy shop, the soda fountain, and the long lunch counters set right up near the door. Because a Sears in those years was not only a store, it was a place you could smell before you could even see it. A warm cloud of roasting nuts and fresh popcorn that drifted out to the sidewalk and pulled you in. Number 14 came out on a plate stamped with a name Sears hoped you would never forget. And today, those very plates sit behind glass in a museum. Number 8 barely lasted 2 years before it vanished for good. And number 1 is the smell that hit you the second you stepped through the doors. The one Sears itself would later beg to bring back and never could. I'm Walter, and this is American Food Memories. If you ever followed your nose to the Sears candy counter, hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because we are counting down 25 forgotten Sears counter foods that vanished when the stores went dark. For most of the 20th century, you could eat your way clear across a Sears without ever leaving the building. There was a snack bar for a quick bite, a soda fountain that mixed your drink by hand, a sit-down coffee shop that served a hot lunch, and up near the front doors, the candy and nut counter that absolutely everybody remembers. Let us start out at the snack bar and work our way slowly toward that counter. Number 25. Fresh buttered popcorn. Start with the smell that started it all. Near the front of the store, next to the candy, a popper worked all day long, and the buttery smell of it rode the air conditioning into every department in the building. It was scooped hot into a paper bag or a striped box, salted heavy, and handed over for pocket change. Kids carried it through the toy aisle while their parents shopped for tires and refrigerators, dropping a trail of kernels the whole way. It was not gourmet, and it did not need to be. It was warm and salty, and it made a big, cold store feel a little bit like a carnival. Many former shoppers will tell you they could find the candy counter blindfolded, just by walking toward the popcorn. That smell was doing a job, and it did it better than any sign Sears ever hung. Nobody sells popcorn at a department store door anymore, and a whole generation has no idea a store ever smelled that good. Number 24. The snack bar hot dog. By the mall years, most every Sears had a little snack bar tucked near the entrance or out by the garden center, and the hot dog was its steady workhorse. A Frankfurter rolled on a warmer until the skin went taut and snapped when you bit it, laid in a soft bun, and dressed with a stripe of yellow mustard and a spoon of sweet relish. It cost almost nothing, and it turned a shopping trip into a lunch break. Menus varied by location, so some counters ladled chili and onions over the top, and some kept it plain and simple. For a kid dragged along on a Saturday of errands, the promise of a Sears hot dog was the one thing that made the whole trip worth standing still for. Dads grabbed one standing up between departments. Whole families ate them on a bench by the doors, shopping bags piled at their feet. It was never fine dining, but it was fast, hot, and yours. And it tasted like a small reward in the middle of a long day. Number 23. Soft pretzels. Right alongside the hot dog, a lot of snack bars kept a case of soft pretzels turning under a warm light, gold and glossy, and dusted with big crystals of salt. You pulled one apart in warm ropes and dragged each piece through a little paper cup of yellow mustard. It was cheap, it was filling, and it kept a restless child busy for a good 10 minutes while the grown-ups argued over a washing machine or a set of tires. A common department store version leaned soft and doughy rather than crisp, chewy in the middle with just a little pull to it. Nobody ever drove across town to Sears for a pretzel, but plenty of people can still feel the warm salt of one between their fingers, standing in the middle of a long afternoon under those humming fluorescent lights, waiting on a parent who was never quite done shopping. Number 22. Fountain cold drinks. Long before a cooler of cans stood by every register, The Sears soda fountain mixed your drink by hand, one glass at a time, cola pulled from a spigot over crushed ice, orange and grape and root beer poured to order, and the fizz hissing up over the rim as the glass filled. This was the pause in the middle of a long trip, the thing your mother bought you to keep the peace when your feet hurt and the store felt endless. Sears had fountains in its stores as far back as the 1920s, so for a lot of families, a hand-mixed fountain drink was simply part of what going to Sears felt like, as ordinary as the escalator and the smell of new tires. Cold, sweet, a little syrupy, and made right in front of you while you watched. It tasted better than anything that ever came out of a can, and everyone who remembers it will tell you exactly that. Number 21. Cherry and lemon phosphates. Here is a fountain drink most people under a certain age have never even tasted. A phosphate was soda water and flavored syrup with a small splash of something tart that gave it a clean, zippy bite, sharp and fizzy, and not too sweet. Cherry was the runaway favorite, lemon close behind, and every soda jerk built it a little differently. He pulled the syrup, hit it with soda, and slid the tall glass across the counter while you watched, and no two were ever quite the same. These faded away as bottled and canned soda took over the world, and they quietly took a whole way of drinking with them. A whole idea that a cold drink was something a person made for you, not something you grabbed off a shelf. If you ever had a real cherry phosphate at a Sears fountain on a hot afternoon, you know it is a flavor that snapped you wide awake and stuck with you for 60 years. Number 20. The ice cream soda. When the fountain wanted to show off, it made an ice cream soda. Flavored syrup in the bottom of the glass, a splash of cream, soda water fizzed in hard to make a tall foam, and then 2 scoops of ice cream lowered in, so the whole thing frothed up and over the rim. You got a long spoon and a paper straw and a fat wad of napkins because there was no clean way to drink one and everybody knew it. It was somewhere between a drink and a dessert and could not decide which, and that was exactly the point of it. You chased the ice cream with the spoon and drank the fizzy, sweet soda through the straw until the two ran together at the bottom. For a lot of kids, an ice cream soda at the Sears fountain was the reward that made a whole day of being marched through the store finally pay off. Number 19. Milkshakes and malts. The green mixing machine on the back counter was the beating heart of the fountain, and it spun up milkshakes and malts thick enough to bend a paper straw in half. Ice cream, cold milk, and syrup whirred together on that spindle until frosty, and for a malt, a heaping spoon of malt powder went in for that deep, toasted, slightly nutty flavor the kids could never quite name. Here was the very best part, the part everybody remembers. The soda jerk poured your glass full and then set the frosty metal mixing cup down right beside it, with the extra still inside. Getting that second pour out of the silver cup felt like a bonus you had somehow gotten away with, a little more than you paid for. A plain shake was wonderful on its own, but a malt, with that little something extra waiting in the cold tin, was the one you carried in your memory for the rest of your life. Number 18. The hot fudge sundae. The Sears fountain sundae came out looking like a small celebration in a tall glass. Scoops of vanilla ice cream, warm dark fudge poured over until it ran down the sides and pooled at the bottom. A crown of whipped cream, a scatter of chopped nuts from the counter up front, and a single bright red cherry set right on top. The whole magic was in the contrast, the hot fudge going firm and chewy right where it touched the cold ice cream, turning into a soft shell you had to crack with your spoon. You dug a long spoon all the way to the bottom to get a little of everything in one perfect bite. It was the treat waiting at the end of a long shopping trip, the thing that got promised in the morning to keep the peace all afternoon. For a lot of people, it is simply the single sweetest thing they can still picture anywhere inside those store walls. Number 17. The banana split. If the sundae was a celebration, the banana split was a whole party in a boat-shaped dish. A banana, peeled and split right down the middle. 3 scoops of ice cream lined up between the halves, 3 different sauces poured down the row, a long rope of whipped cream over the top, chopped nuts and cherries set down the line. It was far too much for one person, and that was the entire point of it. You split it 3 ways with your brother and your sister, everybody digging in from their own end with a long spoon, staking out their favorite scoop. It turned an ordinary Saturday at the store into a day the kids actually asked to come along for. It came out so big and so loaded that other shoppers turned to look. Nobody builds one like that at a store counter anymore, for the simple reason that those counters are gone, and the people who could build one right went with them. Number 16. Ice cream cones and soft serve. Not every treat needed a glass and a long spoon. At many Sears counters, you could just get a scoop or 2 hand-dipped onto a cone for the walk back out to the car, and by the later years, some locations added a soft serve machine that curled it out in a tall spiral with a little peak on top. A cone was the cheapest happiness in the whole store, a couple of scoops that cost next to nothing and kept a kid perfectly quiet all the way through the parking lot. It melted faster than you could eat it in the summer heat, ran down your wrist and onto your good shirt, and nobody minded one bit because that was just what a cone did, simple, cold, and gone in 5 minutes flat. It was the easiest treat the store ever sold, and the one a tired parent reached for when they just needed 10 more quiet minutes to finish shopping. Before we go on, take a second to picture what a Sears actually was to a family back then. It was not a quick errand you ran on your way somewhere else. It was a destination, a place you could lose a whole afternoon, and the food was a big part of the reason why. The store wanted you to stay, to shop the next aisle and the one after that, to try the mattress and price the lawnmower, and nothing kept a family in the building like a full stomach and a happy child. So the popcorn popped all day long, the fountain hissed and foamed, and the smell of roasting nuts hung in the air on purpose, a warm invitation you could not quite refuse. The food was never really the point of Sears. It was the thing that made the point of Sears bearable, the small pleasure folded into a long chore. And somehow, all these years later, it is the part we remember most clearly of all. I would love to hear from you before we get up to the counter. Which Sears do you remember, and what did you always get? Leave it down in the comments as we count along, and let the rest of us remember it right there with you. Number 15. Grilled cheese and the club sandwich. Many of the bigger stores had a proper sit-down coffee shop, and its lunch felt like a real restaurant after a long morning of shopping. The grilled cheese came griddled gold and crisp and cut on the diagonal, the cheese pulling into strings when you lifted the halves. The club was a triple-decker of turkey, bacon, lettuce, and tomato, stacked on toast, quartered, and pinned together with frilled toothpicks so it would not slide apart. Menus varied by city and by store, so no 2 Sears coffee shops ever served exactly the same board. But sliding into a padded booth or up onto a stool, setting down the heavy shopping bags, and ordering a hot sandwich brought right to your table was a small luxury a working family could actually afford. It was the difference between running an errand and having an afternoon out, and for a lot of mothers, that hot lunch was the closest thing to a break they got all week. Number 14. The hot lunch plate. Now for the plate I teased at the very start. In the sit-down coffee shop, the hot lunch was the closest thing Sears had to a home-cooked dinner. A slice of roast turkey or a square of meatloaf under a ladle of gravy, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a cooked vegetable, all on one warm plate. Here is the detail that lasts. By 1967, that food came out on real china stamped with the words Sears Coffee House, fired by an actual dinnerware maker. And today, one of those very plates sits behind glass in a museum, saved like an artifact from a lost civilization. The dish itself changed from store to store, so we will call it honestly what it was: a hot lunch plate that varied by location. But it came to your table warm, on that real stamped china carried by a waitress, for the price of a modest lunch. For a tired shopper with sore feet and a full cart waiting, it was a genuine sit-down meal in the middle of a busy, ordinary day. Number 13. Homemade soup of the day. Right alongside that plate, the coffee shop almost always had a soup of the day, simmered somewhere in the back and ladled into a heavy cup with a little cellophane sleeve of crackers set on the saucer. Vegetable one day, bean or chicken noodle the next, split pea when it turned cold. It changed with the kitchen and the weather outside. On a raw afternoon of trudging through a big drafty store, a hot cup of soup took the chill right out of your hands. It was cheap, it was filling, and it turned a quick lunch into something that felt like a small act of care after a long day of being on your feet. A lot of former customers will tell you the soup and half a sandwich at the Sears Coffee Shop was their mother's idea of a proper treat, and that they would give a great deal to sit across from her at that little table just one more time. Number 12. A slice of pie. No coffee shop lunch was ever truly finished without a slice of pie from the case at the end of the counter. Apple with a flaky double crust, coconut cream under a high cloud of meringue, lemon, cherry, banana cream. Whatever the kitchen had turning that day under the glass, it was cut into tall wedges and slid out one at a time onto a little plate. And if you were feeling like a real treat, it came warmed, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting slowly over the top. Pie and coffee at the store counter was a small ritual that a lot of people kept up for years, a reason to sit down before heading back out into the day. The pie was rarely fancy, and it did not have to be. It was steady and sweet and homemade tasting, and it gave a shopper permission to rest a few more minutes before the long drive home. Number 11. Bottomless coffee at the Sears Coffee House. For the grown-ups, the whole point of the coffee shop was very often just the coffee. It came black and hot into a thick porcelain cup, set down on a saucer, and a waitress came back around to fill it again and again without you ever having to ask her twice. A single cup of coffee bought you a seat and a warm place to rest your feet for as long as you cared to sit there. This was where a husband waited out his wife's shopping with the newspaper, where two neighbors ran into each other and caught up for an hour, where an older man came in the middle of a quiet afternoon just to be around the sound of other people. The coffee itself was nothing fancy at all, but that cup, at that counter, with the refill always coming, was one of the last cheap and easy comforts a great big store ever thought to offer a person, and it is one of the first things it took away. Stop and think for a second about how much of a life actually happened at those counters. A first date over a shared banana split, both of them too nervous to eat. A grandmother treating a grandchild to a sundae after buying his school clothes, making him promise not to tell. A widower who came in for a cup of coffee every single day just to be around people for an hour. The Sears counter was never only about the food that crossed it. For a lot of towns, it was a kind of public living room, a warm and well-lit place where you could sit down, be waited on, and belong for a little while. And you did not need much money in your pocket to do it. That is the part no catalog ever advertised and no annual report ever counted, and it is the part people miss the very most now that it is gone. Number 10. Deli sandwiches, cold cuts, and cheeses. Here is a chapter most people forgot Sears ever wrote. In 1988, as the old coffee shops were quietly closing, Sears tried something new and turned some of them into a fresh deli and cafe, with cold cuts and cheeses sliced to order, sandwiches built fresh in front of you, and coffees and teas to go with them. For a moment, it looked like the old store food might reinvent itself for a whole new generation. You could grab a real sandwich on fresh bread between departments, sit for a few quiet minutes, and get back to your shopping. It was actually a good idea. It just arrived a little too late, in a store that was already beginning to struggle against the newer chains, and most shoppers barely noticed it had come at all before it was gone again. Number 9. Fresh-baked cookies and pastries. That same late deli and cafe put a small bakery case out front, and for a couple of short years the smell of fresh cookies and warm pastries drifted through the store the way the roasting nuts once had, back when the store still knew how to pull you in with your nose. Warm cookies by the deli, sticky Danish, muffins, cinnamon rolls, sweet things baked close by and sold one at a time. It was Sears reaching back for something it used to do so well, trying to give people a reason to slow down and linger again. For the shoppers who happened to catch those couple of years, it was a lovely little surprise, a real bakery smell in the very last place on earth you would ever think to look for one. Number 8. Fresh baked bread. This is the one that barely lasted at all. The deli and cafe baked its own bread, real loaves you could smell before you ever saw them, meant to make those fresh sandwiches feel like something a cut above. But the whole experiment ran only about 2 years from end to end. By 1990 and into 1991, nearly every one of those little bakeries and delis was closed, the ovens gone cold, the cases hauled out to the loading dock. Most shoppers never even knew Sears baked its own bread at all. It came and it went so fast that today it lives on only in the memory of the few who happened to walk past a warm loaf in a Sears in 1989 and stopped and thought, of all the places in the world, here, of all places. And that, told small, is really the whole story of Sears food. The bulk candy and the nut counters were quietly phased out through the 1980s. The sit-down coffee shops became those little delis, and then the delis closed too. There is one detail here that says just about everything. As the smell of roasting nuts disappeared from the stores, people inside Sears reportedly argued to bring the candy counter back, precisely because that smell had pulled shoppers through the doors like nothing else the company ever tried. But it never did come back. The food went first, a full generation before most of the buildings did, and the long, slow decline that ended in bankruptcy in 2018 only switched off lights that had already gone dim years before. People did not just lose a store, they lost the smell that used to hit them at the door. And that smell is exactly where our final 7 live. So let us finally go up to the counter. Number 7. Bulk penny candy and hard candies. Up at the front of the store, under a long run of glass, was the candy counter. And this is where a child's whole allowance went to die a happy death. Rows of bins and cases filled with hard candies, penny candy, ribbon candy, root beer barrels, butterscotch discs, horehound, and lemon drops. Every bit of it scooped out to order. You pointed through the glass, the clerk weighed your choices out into a little white paper bag, and you carried it away like buried treasure. Makers and stock varied store to store, since the counter was often its own little concession run by an outside seller. But the ritual was exactly the same everywhere in the country. A single quarter went a very long way, and choosing what to spend it on was half the fun and most of the agony. For a great many kids, that glass case was the single best thing in the entire enormous store, tools and toys included. Number 6. Red and black licorice. Somewhere in that long case was always the licorice, the candy you either loved with your whole heart or quietly traded away to your sister. Long ropes and short bites of it, red and black both, chewy and strong, sold by weight into the same little bag as everything else. The black licorice split families right down the middle, adored by the grandparents and flatly refused by the grandchildren, while the red vanished so fast it barely made it to the car. It stuck to your back teeth, and it lasted a good long while, which mattered a great deal when you only got one small bag to make last the whole trip. A lot of people cannot catch the smell of licorice today without being pulled straight back to that counter, 7 years old again, pointing through the glass at the ropes and waiting on the scale. Number 5. Swedish fish. Then there were the Swedish fish, the little chewy candies you counted out yourself one at a time into the bag. Soft and fruity, and just firm enough to chew on for a while. They were exactly the kind of candy a patient kid could make last all the way home in the back seat of the car. Because the counter sold everything by weight, you learned fast and young exactly how many you could get for your money, and then you guarded that little bag with your life against a reaching brother. They are still around on a shelf today, in a sealed bag under bright lights, but scooped from an open glass case at the front of a Sears, counted out under your own careful eye while the clerk waited, they were somehow better. That is a thing a bag off a shelf can never quite give back to you, no matter how many you buy. Number 4. Chocolate-covered peanuts and raisins. For an awful lot of families, this was Dad's order, every single time, without fail. Chocolate-covered peanuts and chocolate-covered raisins, scooped from the case by the quarter pound, the one sweet and crunchy, the other sweet and chewy and dark. He would get his own little bag while you got yours, and then he would make it last through the whole rest of the trip, one or two at a time, offering you exactly one if you asked nicely. There was something about the pair of them together, the peanut and the raisin, that felt grown up and a little bit generous all at once. A small, private pleasure a working man allowed himself on a Saturday. Kids today have never once scooped a warm quarter pound of chocolate peanuts from a glass case, and most of them never will. That was a small, ordinary, everyday pleasure that quietly slipped away while nobody was watching. Number 3. Chocolate stars with white sprinkles. Here is one that people search for by memory and can just about never find made right anymore. Little flat drops of dark chocolate, each one topped with a scatter of tiny, white, nonpareil sprinkles, sold loose from the case by weight like everything else. They snapped clean when you bit them, and then melted slow on your tongue, and the little white beads gave every bite a faint, sugary crunch that you can still feel if you think hard enough. Ask around a room full of people over 60, and you will find grown adults who describe these exactly, right down to the sprinkles, and who still cannot buy them the way they remember from that counter. They were a small, specific, nearly perfect thing, and when the candy counters finally closed, that exact taste, the snap and the crunch and the slow melt, mostly went right along with them. Number 2. Bulk chocolates from the glass case. Number 2 is not any one candy at all, but the whole ritual, the scoop and the scale. The true heart of the counter was that long glass case of loose chocolates, creams and caramels, and nut clusters and turtles and buttercreams, every bit of it sold by the pound. You leaned over the cool glass and pointed. The clerk lifted the lid from the back and scooped exactly what you asked for, tipped it onto a hanging scale, and folded it into a little white paper bag with the top edge rolled down neat. Watching that scale settle and tremble and stop was half the entire pleasure of the thing. It felt, for a moment, like being trusted with something fine and grown up. That case, that scoop, that little rolled bag handed carefully across the glass is a whole piece of American shopping life that simply does not exist anywhere anymore and cannot be bought back at any price. Number 1. Fresh roasted cashews and warm nuts. And the number one thing Sears ever served, the smell that hit you the very second the doors slid open, is the fresh, roasted nuts. Right up front by the entrance, a roaster turned all day long, tumbling cashews and mixed nuts warm and glossy and heavy with salt, scooped hot into a striped bag and handed over still warm in your bare hand. The cashews were the ones people remember most by name, but it was really the smell that did all the work. A rich, warm, roasting cloud that reached clear out to the sidewalk and pulled an entire family in through the doors before anyone had decided to buy a single thing. Employees remember that clocking out at the end of a long shift meant walking right past that nut counter, and one of them called it, simply, the best smell in the world. When the counters finally closed, Sears itself is said to have wished aloud that it could bring that smell back, because nothing the company ever did sold the store like a warm bag of cashews at the door. It could not bring it back. And that is the whole story in one warm handful. The exact thing we lost the day the counters went dark. That is, 25 forgotten Sears counter foods, from the snack bar hot dog to the warm cashews at the door, and nearly every one of them is gone now. They did not disappear because people stopped loving them. They disappeared because the counters closed, the coffee shops went dark, and the roaster up front finally went cold. A full generation before the stores themselves locked their doors for the very last time. If you ever ate at one, you already know it was never really about the food. It was about following your nose to the front of the store, about a sundae at the end of a long day, about the clerk who scooped your candy and weighed it out, and the waitress who kept your coffee full without being asked. It was an everyday American place that let a whole family sit down, be waited on, and belong for an hour. And then, one day, quietly, it was gone. So let me leave you with this. Of all 25, which one would you bring back tomorrow if you could? And does the candy counter get more love than the soda fountain? Or does nothing on earth beat the smell of those warm cashews at the door? Tell me down in the comments. And tell me what your own Sears counter was like, right down to the clerk behind the glass and the waitress who knew your order. Because these were never just snacks between errands. They were the warm smell at the front of the store that told you that you had arrived somewhere good, and we let it slip quietly away. Stay with me for the next one, where we keep pulling these old American food memories back to the table where they belong.